Well, hey, welcome back to the podcast vlog Creatives Who Thrive. My name is Devin Berryhill. I'll be hosting the show for us today and really excited about our guest. He's a friend of mine who I've known for probably the better part of 25 years now.
Wow.
We worked on many projects together, been in the room of some of his songwriting moments where he's written some of his more known songs, but we've probably made 4 or 5 albums together indirectly or together. We've toured together. We've eaten together. Our families are friends. So anyway, welcome to the show, my good friend, Holland Davis.
Hey, Devin. It's awesome to be here.
Right on, man. Well, thanks for joining us.
Wow.
Yesterday, we had our mutual friend, we had Brian Nixon on the show. He was our first guy, and he was kind of the one that inspired us to do this show. But so glad you're here. Basically, what we're trying to do here with the show is just tell stories from artists who make money to make more art. And really the concept behind that is, for our listeners here that are just joining us, the concept is really just to kind of, what are you doing to monetize what you do in a way, not just the products or services you provide, but really maybe if you're a teacher or like you've served in many different capacities in creativity. So we'll do that story, but tell us how you first got into creating stuff. Go way back to the beginning.
Well, I think I got like my first guitar. It was out of Sears. It was one of those Sears and Roebuck guitars, the plastic ones. Yeah. And I think it came like in a kit. It had a cowboy hat, It was, it was like a country western kind of thing. And I would play it, and my parents would say, hey, if you get good at this, we'll get you like a real guitar. And so we were in Japan, and I was taking guitar lessons. What's crazy is the guy that was teaching me guitar loved adventures. So he was just a surf guitar freak. And he taught me all the rhythm parts to every venture song. He never taught me the lead part. So to this day, I cannot play lead guitar. But he taught me all the rhythm parts so he could jam. And he would be jamming doing the lead parts while I was doing all the rhythm parts to the venture songs. And so that kind of got me started on the whole music kind of thing, and it was a passion. And my mom and dad eventually got me my first guitar. It was a Martin D35 copy. It was called a Yamaki, I think is what it was called.
I remember that guitar.
Yeah, it was so. I guess it was so sounded so much like a Martin D35 that Martin sued them. And they had to quit making it. So, I mean, I had like one of the last ones or something, it was just crazy. But that I had that guitar for years. I would lead worship with that guitar. And as I was growing, I just started writing songs. I think my first song I wrote was called Wolfman. And so it was, I don't know why, but I just came up with this.
Wolfman Jack, maybe?
And I just started singing Wolfman. And then I followed up with my second song, which was called Woman. And I just took out Wolfman and I put in Woman, and I would sing those words instead. So it was very, very humble beginnings. And but as I started, playing guitar, I came to Christ when I was 13. and I would just sit in my room. And in those days, there weren't a lot of worship songs, like we have today. All I had was this brown book with fish on it. It's the book you get from Young Life, and I would play these songs in my room for hours, and so my early years of leading worship was like, The Answer, My Friend, is Blowing in the Wind, by Bob Dylan. And but we thought that was the Holy Spirit. That had to do with the Holy Spirit. So it was kind of weird, in those days. There just weren't the songs that we have now. And as I began to, lead worship in churches, a lot of the songs were good songs, but they were kind of goofy songs, like that song, scratch a friend's back, scratch a back next to you and sing la la, right? Yeah. Everybody be scratching everybody's back. And it was kind of a fun moment. But I wanted to say something else. I just wanted to say something else in the music. And so we started writing worship songs. That's kind of what prompted us to start writing songs for the church. And at the time we had like a punk rock outreach band. And so we were doing, we would play in parks and different things like that, doing punk rock music and singing for the Lord and preaching. And we were writing songs for that. So it kind of almost just kind of flowed, out of just what we were doing and what we wanted to accomplish. And it really wasn't like this intentional, like we set out to be creative. It's just, and I guess that's what makes us creative, right? We just see a need and we just start filling the need with whatever we have. And so that kind of set my course. And I remember that band in particular, we started to play more places and gain more kind of popularity. And in fact, Maranatha Music at that time had just started this thing called the Ministry Resource Center, MRC. And they were signing like young bands like us, that were just like these rough diamonds in the rough kind of thing. And then they would put us in the studio, make an album in one day. I mean, literally you would just play live for 3 or 4 songs. They would cut it and then they would give it you 1,000 copies and then you go out on the road and see what happens. And it was, there was kind of like a free thing. And so
let me interject something here. For some of our listeners or people watching this, may not have a context for the Christian music scene, if you will. But in the early 70s in Orange County, California, there was a thing what's commonly called the Jesus movement, and a lot of musicians in Hollywood actually became Jesus followers or Jesus freaks, back in the hippie days. It was kind of the time of Woodstock and that whole thing. And there was a pastor, preacher guy named Chuck Smith who would put on what's called evangelical events, kind of like a Billy Graham type crusade, if you're familiar with that. So through that, there were these initial bands that were used to playing up in Hollywood during kind of the Crosby, Stills, Nash period, acoustic, a lot of good harmonies, kind of almost like the kind Eagles, or that kind of folk. If you're familiar with Buffalo Springfield and Richie Furay and Neil Young, that whole scene was kind of really big in LA, Orange County. And through that just kind of permeated into this new expression of music that was used in the church for the first time. Because up to that point, you would go to church and it would be pianos, pipe organs, suits and ties, everybody kind of very old school
Everybody's wearing
tradition.
A robe.
Yeah. And there was a separation there where young people of the late 60s, early 70s began to want to follow Jesus Christ and the words of the Bible in their own way. That wasn't for their parents. And so from that became these expressions of music. And so through a church like Calvary Chapel, a pastor like Pastor Chuck Smith, he would allow bands to come up on stage during either a church service or throughout the week and actually play at church on stage. Mm-hmm. And not unlike what you hear a lot of like gospel singers, like someone someone like Aretha Franklin or Whitney Houston, you know, they grew up singing gospel in the church, in the choir, and they'd be a soloist. Similar to that, this Pastor Chuck would have bands come up on the stage and play. And through that, they started recording music as well. And so in 71, there was the Everlasting Jesus Music album, right? They had this big white album cover vinyl with a picture of a dove, a red dove on the front. And that album it was like a compilation album of many of the different bands that came out during that time. And from that sprung, if you've heard of people like Greg Laurie, who do things called the Harvest Crusade, and they would do large evangelistic events like Billy Graham would at stadiums, and they would have these musicians come and play. That was later in the 90s and into the early 2000s. So when Holland's talking about MRC, that Ministry Resource Center, that was basically a record label. There was another record label called Maranatha Music together that actually Holland worked for and recorded for later, that produced music and Christian, quote unquote, contemporary Christian music. You may be familiar with artists like Amy Grant or maybe a Petra or something like that. Things have changed. Some of the artists today you might have heard of, if you're not familiar with Christian music, people like Jeremy Camp, maybe someone he has recently had a movie
or even
out.
Like Lauren Daigle.
Yeah.
You know, Lauren Daigle is like a Grammy award-winning artist, you know.
Yeah. So there's some artists, even like a Carrie Underwood, even kind of crosses over a little bit into that world. So to give you a little context, that's kind of the field where Holland, you kind of came out underneath that whole Maranatha music umbrella. So go ahead. Yeah,
because back then there wasn't an industry like there is today. You know, back then it was, in fact, that compilation album you mentioned, the backstory on that, because I think it, in many ways, Maranatha Music was the front runner for indie labels. And they literally took all the bands on their roster, so to speak, and these were bands that were touring. But what they would find out is that they would go to these places and maybe they'd get like $50, after they'd get done playing a gig. They'd drive for 2 hours to some place, play for an hour, and then get $50. And, it wasn't enough to do anything. So they came up with this idea to make these compilation albums that had all the different artists that they were sending out on tour. And then they could, take those albums and then, sell them at their shows and make a living. And so that's kind of was the genesis of that. And then so with us as a young, like, indie punk rock band, I mean, who, in a church, I mean, who does that, right? Yeah. So they basically said, hey, we've got this deal now where you come to our studios, it's free, you record, it's a one-day thing, and then you walk away with 1,000 CDs, and that's your career. Go and have, see what happens.
So they were underwriting this. They were basically underwriting young musicians and bands.
Yeah,
this was about what? Early 80s?
This was 77.
Wow.
It's like 77. So nobody was doing that. I mean, there's no label that was taking a risk like that. And of course, they would kind of make sure that you were legit. And I remember having a meeting with Daryl Mansfield, who was one of the pioneers of that whole era. And he came and sat down and listened to our tape and, met with us. And then he turned to the guy and said, hey, if I can't do something, send these guys, these guys are great, And so that was a huge bump, right? To have like an established artist, basically say, hey, you guys are great. And anytime I do something. So Daryl
was on Polydor before he came to Maranatha Music, his first album. And he was a blues harp. Some of you guys don't know, he's one of the best, Daryl Mansfield was one of the best blues harmonica players ever. I mean, he was up there with the Charlie Musselwhites and, everybody else.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, unbelievable player. So, if you can imagine, all of a sudden, this industry emerges, out of, writing worship music. at this time, our band is starting to take off, and I'm thinking I'm supposed to be a rock star, because that's what we all think, right? Young musicians, it's like, I'm supposed to, get a Grammy. And as I'm up there winning my Grammy, I can say, I just want to thank God for my Grammy. And so that was my big dream, was to be able to do that off of a big stage, and give glory to God for my Grammy. And I remember driving home from a rehearsal, and God just said, I haven't made you for that. I'm like, what do you mean? It says, I've made you for worship music. And I'm like, worship music? That's what you do when you can't make it in the real world. You write worship songs,
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's like, you just think, what? That is just such a lame thing. And so I just remember I'm driving to rehearsal, and I'm like, God, if you are serious about this, you're going to have to end this whole deal. I'm going to be a rock star. That's what I'm going to be. And so I remember after rehearsal, we had a great band, and everyone, without fail, everyone in the band, they just said, I know we got this tour coming up. I know we're going to go into the studio, but I just got a new job. I can't take the time off, so I'm quitting the band. And then the drummer goes, yeah, I just got a new job. I can't go on tour. I got to quit the band. And then the keyboard player looked at the keyboard player and goes, I can't stand this other keyboard player guy. He's just a jerk. I'm quitting the band. And then the other keyboard player looks at the other, the keyboard player and goes, I think you're a jerk too, so I'm quitting the band. And then it got down to like me and the last guy, and he goes, I'm not going to be in a band with just you. I'm quitting the band.
Oh, God.
And so like the whole band quit, and God just completely ended it. It's like it was over. And I just thought, okay, well, then I'm going to take all of this creative energy and I'm going to put it into writing songs for the church. And that's what really got me. That was the real focus, where I started to really focus on writing songs for the church. And at that time, our church was a Calvary Chapel, and we were writing songs. And I think our pastor had gotten a song on one of the very early precursors to, like, you have a lot of these programs today where record companies will send you out, songs ahead of time, before they get released, to kind of, so you can teach them in your churches and that sort of thing. And this was like the very first one of those ever programs. And so he had a song that was in one of those for Maranatha Music. And then, so I started thinking, oh, I'll write songs that will end up in one of those. And of course it never did. But then our church became a part of a vineyard church. And that's when all of a sudden one of the other churches did one of my songs by the name of Glorious. They saw it they heard it at a conference, and they were like, "Oh, we love that song. We want to record that on one of our live worship recordings." And that was actually the very beginning of the whole live music recordings of churches. There was no live, everything was studio produced at that time. And the Vineyard was the first ones that did like actual live recording of a worship service, and then went back and they would retrack things and fix things and reproduce it, remix it, and then master it and put it out as a finished product. And so that song, I think, was the first song that was ever recorded of something that I had written. And that was like, oh my goodness, that kind of opened my eyes up to this idea that there is a music industry. Mm-hmm. I knew that, there's making records, but I never, that never really made any money for me. So I'm like, it didn't really connect. But then all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, I actually got a song on a record. That's amazing. But the problem with the Vineyard being a church run label is that, they had so many churches and they were giving everybody a turn, right? Everybody that they wanted to, there was a lot of songs being written, and they became like the filter. And so like I had like a ton of songs that just weren't being recorded. And that's when I met this guy by the name of Tim Kaufman actually, I think I met him through you, because I would lead worship at the Point Loma, where you were leading worship. Yeah. And I think he was at something where, oh no, I think what it was I was in this band called Heaven's Research, and we played at the Spirit Club, and it was hilarious because the guy made us wear these research lab coats, these white lab coats. And we had this rockin' set, and he had it in his idea to open with a ballad. We're like, please do not open with a ballad. This is a crowd killer.
Especially the Spirit Club. That was like the dive punk rock heavy metal bar.
It was not the place
in San Diego.
So here we are. I'm playing in this band, and he opens with a ballad, and before the song is over, the place is empty. I mean, we cleared out the only people there were our wives and Tim Kaufman and the lead singer from a local band called Souls in Exile. Oh, yeah. Remember that band? Yeah. And they saw me, they approached me afterwards. They wanted me to play keys in their band, you know?
Well, don't forget the bartender. He was there too.
The bartender was there. Yeah.
When I played there, my brother and I had a band. We played there on a Tuesday night, and we went on at like 12:30, and it was like us two, maybe my wife Wendy, and the bartender. And, you know.
And we literally were voted worst band of the year in the Reader, the San Diego Reader. We're worst band of the year. I mean, that's an honor, right?
That's yes, that is. You I know really who wrote that hard. Probably too. I know the guy who wrote that. Yeah, he's not a nice guy.
No, and
we were. If you like the Reader.
But we were terrible. I mean, it was, I mean, the band was great, but to open the evening with a ballad, that is just a crowd killer. And literally we did clear the thing. And I think through all of this, you know, Tim started hearing some of my songs, and then he started recording them. Then you and I started working together on records at that time. And so it just be kind of, there's just like a cool scene, you know, in San Diego. It seemed like San Diego had a cool, like, little music scene going on.
Oh yeah.
It used to be like that in LA. It's not so much now, but, and I don't know if it's still like that in San Diego. We're in Orange County, and Orange County doesn't really have a music scene. You know, the music scene in Orange County is really in the church. I mean, that is the music scene.
Music scene. That was. Yeah. Well, I mean, that was during the period of time of like when POD was coming out, Switchfoot was coming out, even Jeremy Camp later came out of here, but a lot of Jewel was here in town. Members of like Stone Temple Pilots were here. Even Eddie Vedder was up in North County for a while. Yeah, from Pearl Jam. So there was a lot of music coming out of San Diego from the downtown club scene all the way through the church, believe it or not. It was just a very prolific time. The early 90s produced some really great music, and it was a great time. So yeah, Tim Kaufman was a studio owner and concert promoter that Holland and I both met. I met Tim through, I think he was promoting a Petra concert at Nazarene College, where I was going to school. And we opened up, I think, for Crystal Lewis or one of these, Phil Kagi, somebody was coming through town, and we were the opening act, my band that I had at the time. And he came up afterwards and said, wow, you guys are really good. You want to record an album kind of thing. So a lot of people were had studios here in town. It was very, it was a scene that was cool. So let's fast forward a little bit, Holland. So you work with Tim, and then I remember you transitioning into the Maranatha music, and then that's when you were able to do "Let It Rise," probably your most popular song, right?
Yeah, well, that was through. That was actually, we were leading worship, I think, at a church in Santee, and we were doing like a worship conference. Tim is kind of the one that got me doing worship conferences with. What they would call the Adventures in God's Presence worship conferences. Yeah. And so we were doing one in Santee, and a girl that was an A&R person for Maranatha Music actually was there that night and saw us do our thing and emailed me, or actually it was on CompuServe. If you remember CompuServe, like this is before Facebook, like this is before AOL. Yeah, it's like CompuServe, you know?
Right.
And there was this little worship leader group in CompuServe. And so that was how I made, her name was Andrea Tucker. And that's how I made the connection with Maranatha. She's like, hey, we're doing this song listening session. And, you know, we want to invite you up. And I think like the week before that, I was asked to lead worship at Calvary Chapel Point Loma at their midweek study, which was in that little coffee shop right on the beach, you know?
Yeah, an Ocean Beach.
And
yeah.
That's where Let It Rise was written, you know? Yeah. And that night, because it was one of those, you know, situations where the crowd was just, you know, it was a beach crowd. They're eating food, they're talking, they're, you know, coming in and out. You know, it's not like a Bible study crowd, right? Yeah. And I'm just kind of freaking out. And so I go back in the kitchen and I have these 3 chords running through my head. And I, you know, walked out of the kitchen. I turned everyone that was in the band and said, here, play these chords. And so everyone started playing these chords, and I just turned around and just, because in my heart, I was thinking, this is not a place where God is going to be present. Like, it's just chaos. And if anything's going to happen, the presence of God's just going to have to fill this place. And so that's how the song came out. It was really just like a spontaneous kind of prayer. And it just came out exactly the way it's known today. And I just started singing, let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the praises of the King rise among us. Let it rise. Oh, let it rise. And that was the simplicity of the song. Yeah. And just started building on that lyric. But so I get invited to this Maranatha thing, and the guy that's leading it goes, you know, you can listen to our songs or we can listen to your songs. And we would rather listen to your songs. So I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not prepared. You know, I didn't bring my charts. I didn't, you know, I'm not one of those spontaneous kind of guys that can just take things out of the top of my head. So, so they start going around the room, and I think I was like the last one or next to the last one. And I'm going through all the songs that we had recorded with Tim Kaufman, you know, that songs that I knew were, like, this song is being used right now in churches, and it's you know, it's really, really doing great. And so I thought, you know, of course they'll want to sign these songs. And so I'm going through the catalog, and they're like, no, you got anything else? You know, and it's like, no, that's not what we're looking for. And, you know, they just kept passing over songs. I'm like, man, you guys don't know a great song when you hear it. No wonder you're not like number one, you know. That's what was going on in my head. And then I said, well, I've got this song. It's really not a song. It's just kind of like this thing that happened at this Bible study. And I played Let It Rise, and the whole room just went, that's the song. That's the song. And the guy goes, we're in the studio right now. And, you know, Paul Balash is recording an album for us, and you have to give us that song tomorrow. We're going to record it. Wow. And so it literally, from that night, the next day, it was sent to Paul Balash. It was, you know, put on a recording, and on Praise Band 7, it was called the album was called Rock of Ages. And that was the first introduction of Let It Rise. And then that year it was put on the Promise Keepers records, and then Billy Graham started playing it at his events, and Franklin Graham started playing it at his events. Then Greg Laurie started playing it at the Harvest Crusades, and it just blew up. It just was, you know, it was so unpredictable, but it just blew up. And you know, and I think that you know, you can't predict a hit. like anyone that says that like they can tell a hit song, they're just lying to you, because it's like it's a phenomenon. You know, nobody really knows what is going to hit with people. You know.
Hi, this is Bob Berryhill of the Surfaris, original guitarist, welcoming you to the Campus Jacks Newport Beach Surf Fest on June 16, 2021. I'd like to introduce you to the Surfaris. My wife Jean on bass guitar, my son Devin on guitar, and my son Joel on drums.
Yeah, we'd love to see you there. StellarShows.net. Buy a table. Invite all your friends.
Doors open at 5:30. Show starts at 7. We've got the opener, the Tourmaliners, my new band. It's our Orange County debut.
Come out and see us. We're going to have a rockin' good time.
What did it help you achieve at that point? Where were you able to kind of rechannel those resources into the next thing?
Well, see, the thing with you know, with Let It Rise is there were several things that opened up. One was it opened up a relationship with Maranatha Music, where I eventually went to work for them, and started out in marketing, and that opened up doors to other relationships, you know. And as I was working at Maranatha Music, I met a guy by the name of Danny McGuffey, who was the VP of Marketing for Integrity.
Well, you know, the theme of the show here is how to continue creating and making art, and it takes resources to do that, to keep going with it. And so this was probably a pinnacle moment to kind of launch you into the next chapter.
And the WoW brand was kind of like the Christian version of the Now series in England. You know, in England, Now was like huge. It's like all the top 40 songs are on it. And so they did the same thing with the WoW, but in the worship genre, there wasn't anything that kind of pulled everyone together. Everyone was kind of in their own little tribe. You know, you had the Calvary Chapel tribe with Maranatha Music. You had the Vineyard tribe. You had you know, the English guys that were doing their stuff with Kingsway Music. Then you had Word Music was doing their stuff. All these little labels were doing like their thing, and no one was really capturing the market. And so Scott had this idea to pull us all together. And then of course Alex McDougall was at that time was working with the Vineyard, and I was working with Maranatha Music. And so it was myself, Alex McDougall, Danny McGuffey, and Scott Hughes, and then Chris Tomlinson, who was the A&R director for Integrity Music. Robert Brenner was working in marketing, and you know, they just got us all in a room and we brainstormed how to kind of expand the genre, and by networking our labels together and forming a product called Wild Worship. And so Let It Rise, and independent of me, it wasn't my decision. It was you know, something, a collaborative effort, ended up on the very first Wild Worship album, and the very first Wild Worship album shipped gold. And then it immediately went platinum, like within a year, and now it's multi-platinum. And so it's like, it's, you know, all of that, you know, those relationships are like key, you know, because it's, you know, how it's not just creating art, it's how do you get the art out, you know, to the masses, you know.
That's what, yeah. Let me pause you right there, because that's the key right there. It seems like most of your creatives that are monetizing what they're doing in a successful way are doing it in a community of some form.
Right.
Even initially, like you said, you went to that meeting where they were doing, songwriters were there, and you know, there happened to be some people from the Maranatha Music label there, but it was, you know, here, share us your songs. Everybody go around the room and share a song. So again, your experience was birthed out of community. And even going back with Tim Coffin with the Rolltop music label, we had quite a community of musicians here in San Diego.
Yeah.
So you've kind of benefited all along from being part of a tribe.
Yeah.
And the tribe has just kind of gotten larger and larger and larger for you, it seems like.
Yeah, I think with Tim, there was like a community of like 5 writers that were contributing to the album. You know?
Yeah. I contributed 3 songs to the 4th worship album he did, and played guitar on, I think, 1 through 4.
Yeah, I think you played on almost all of them.
Yeah. That was a wonderful experience because we got to learn the studio. I remember both of us being in the studio too, learning. Tim was one of these producers who he had a studio and he was really into all the tube microphones and the tube guitar amplifiers and these mic preamps. And it was back in the days when we were transitioning from analog into digital. So he had all the first ADAT setup. Remember?
Right.
When we were using ADAT, was using VHS tape literally to record because that was digital tape. And then mastering to DAT. Remember that period of time? DAT. It was like, wow, tape that big, but it was digital tape. And then, then putting it onto CD, and remember the 3 letters DDD or AAD or whatever they would grade it, analog or digital. And so Tim was really good in educating you and I, particularly in the studio on, I became a studio guitar player because of that. And
understanding good tone.
Yeah.
How to get good tone, which is like so hard to do.
It is. And he would get great vocal takes from you. He knew how to get a good take on tape from a vocal. I remember seeing you track vocals, and he would know how to coach. He was a real mentor to all of us. And that's another thing too in the creative world, is finding a mentor. You've mentioned some people that were mentors for you. Tim was definitely a mentor for us back in the early 90s. Gave us our first shots at making. In fact, some of my albums up here, I have Tim produce that one and that one.
I see it.
You helped produce that one, actually.
Yeah.
Remember that one?
The Wipeout, yes.
Yeah. So, well, cool. So from there, Wow Worship goes, ships gold, eventually goes triple platinum. Again, opening you had a lot of openings, and then I think we reconnected again at Calvary Chapel. You helped start the Calvary Chapel music label.
Right. Well, restarted. It had gone defunct and wasn't producing anything. And this kind of goes back to my philosophy. It's like all music is created in a community. Like all art is created in a community. And so within the community of the churches of Calvary Chapel, I had seen because worship had become such an industry, and it literally had become like really, kind of a hit-driven industry. It's like the whole independent side of worship had disappeared. And one of the things I started at Maranatha Music was this thing called Worship Underground, because I realized that what we were producing as a label kind of had a sound and it had an audience, and so if you couldn't change the sound, like you couldn't change the formula. Like the formula works, so don't break the formula.
Right.
But I noticed that the formula was losing touch with the audience. But in the local churches, like these independent artists, they were like creating stuff that was unbelievable. And I remember I get this cassette tape from a church called University Baptist Church. And it was like really bad versions of Vineyard songs. And they were out of tune and the guitars weren't tuned. It was just badly produced, And, but I heard like a creative spark in there. I could hear that there's something unique about it. So I kept in contact with this guy, and then he sent me a second CD called All I Can Say. And it was like, okay, this guy's ready. He's ready. He's ready now. He's got the sound. He's got everything. And so that guy was David Crowder. And so I signed him to his first album deal. with Worship Underground, and it was just him from his local church. It was like their local church album that they had produced, but it was just unbelievable. And so that just kind of awakened me to the fact that there was a whole indie music scene. When I was doing bands, I was always into the indie music scene. I wasn't really into the corporate rock scene. It's like once you got there, it's like you sold out, right? So that was the big thing. Don't sell out. So remain poor and in your Volkswagen Bug, It's like that's the dream. It's like, no, I want a house someday and have kids, So, so I discovered this whole indie music scene in the church that was just unbelievable. And so we created this album label to kind of give voice to that sound. And we started signing churches. This is before anybody was doing this. I think at that time, Integrity Music would find a church, then they would send like a whole production team in, like a band, and they would record an album with that church musician, with the musicians there, but then they would bring their production team, and it would be like Tom Brooks was the guy leading that, and it'd be like a world-class thing. I mean, Tom Brooks is now recording with everybody, in LA. And so the coming out of Maranatha Music, that idea was still in my mind. And so I thought, we need to find a way to get independent artists to get their music out that are church related, that they don't have to go through the filter of corporate, music, the corporate label kind of thing. And because that was the problem with Maranatha Music, is that I discovered these great songwriters, but maybe they wrote one song. And so when you're like thinking, okay, am I going to take that one song and invest a lot of money to get that one song out? Or am I going to invest in the writer that writes 10 great songs and get his songs out? And so from a corporate standpoint, you do the guy that writes 10 great songs, but the other songs that are great songs that deserve to be heard, they don't get heard. So I had this idea. My first idea was to create a website called Generation Praise, which was like, I'm going to put all my worship songs on there, and then everyone will discover them. And so I did. I put all my worship songs on there, and I discovered them. I think my family discovered them. And, my mom, oh, this is so great. But no one else discovered them, And that's when I remembered, oh, it's a party. You got to have a party, right? So we relaunched it as Worship Song. And so we have worshipsong.com. And I just invited all my friends to put their songs on there. And so we have great writers on there, but we have people that are, I think our average is like 5,000 songs are heard every day. Of like independent music. It's not signed. It's, we've actually gotten people signed off of the site because, A&R guys are always looking for new songs. And so they'll go to that site and look for stuff. And and that parlayed into, wow, the whole multi-track thing is opening up. And a friend of mine developed a multi-track band app so that we give away for free. And so now that's part of Worship Song. We have it's an award-winning band app. In fact, there's several of the multi-track apps that are out there that are branded by other companies, but it's actually our app. And so all the Worship Song songs work in those apps as well as their songs work in our app. And so it's just, we just started seeing how do we, and really just came down to the bottom line is like, we're all creating, how do we get it out there? How do we get it heard? And so, and unfortunately, you would think just getting a bunch of artists together that would be good enough, but artists are terrible at promoting. And that's why we all need help, right?
Yeah.
And so, so part of, what we do at Worship Song is because of what I learned at Maranatha was marketing, how to market. it becomes a marketing platform for, independent, music, independent worship music, and or songs for the church. And so, but it's just, again, it's been a natural progression of, like, I have a song, I sing the song in my local church. Other people started hearing it. They started doing it in their churches. But how do you get it beyond that? How do we create a way to get it out there? And so that's, and then the multi-track band app, we've kind of stumbled on that because we thought we have these tracks. What do we do with these tracks? And then we discovered people wanted the tracks. They wanted to, play, in a live setting to the tracks, and they wanted to, kind of to beef up their sound, or a lot of them use it for rehearsal. Some of them use it as pure performance tracks. And all of these things just kind of became a natural flow from one to the other.
What platforms are you using today, or that you see out there? Obviously, you have your own app, and worshipsong.com. You can get to that app through worshipsong.com as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's that? If they were to go on the iTunes App Store or Google Play, what would it be titled?
Worship Song Band App.
Worship Song Band App.
Yeah.
So if you're listening now and you need some good tracks and a way to, when we say tracks, you're playing to like Ableton or something like that, or is that directly from the app? You can play that through your sound system.
Yeah, it's a true multi-track band app. So you can mix. It's got a mixer. We've innovated it. The thing that is unique about what we're doing, because we're all creatives, it's not a corporate thing. It's not like we purchase something and we're just trying to sell products. We're all passionate about what we do. We care about what we do. And so we're always thinking, how do we make it better? What kind of features can we add? So like our band app, you can put lyrics in it. You can put it to a projector. You can play along to it, and then the lyrics will automatically change on the screen. You can loop it. You can actually loop a section, because when you're playing live, you want to loop the chorus. You can loop the chorus live and do that as many times as you want. You could just set it on permanent loop and be like all the other worship bands out there right now. Just sing one section of the song over and over again.
We got to do another show on that one. Band in the box.
Yes.
No, just kidding.
But yeah, we've got all of that stuff. But the thing is but still, as an artist, there's so many ways to get your songs out there today. We use I use DistroKid. I've used CD Baby in the past. CD Baby was great, if you have CDs, but now, people don't have CDs. And so the market is changing. And so like DistroKid probably has the best, digital platform that I've seen out there. I know there's other ones that are out, but those are the two that I've had experience with. And but there's also online kind of concert things. There's this guy, he's done this thing on Facebook called Red's Room, and basically he gets artists from all over the world, literally. And every Friday and Saturday they do a 2-hour live streaming concert, and with all these artists from all over the world. And I've started doing that, just as a way to open up new relationships, and also to have the songs be heard in a different audience. Nice. And what's kind of cool is I've kind of seen this like Lionel Richie on American Idol, right? Here's a guy that he's a legitimate icon. I mean, he's probably the biggest thing on that show is Lionel Richie. Right. But he's like the big fish in the small pond, because of his street creds and everything else. And he gets to, play every now and then on the program, and then that bumps record sales, and that's, kind of gets his stuff out. If you can find a way to be the big fish in a small pond, that's and everybody can find that place. If you're a small even a regional. I wouldn't be considering myself anymore a national person. I probably at one time I could have done that when Let It Rise was at its pinnacle, and we were doing conferences and teaching all over the United States, and I've got to play with some great guys. I got to play with Chester Thompson from Genesis, which is kind of that was kind of like a highlight. Sure. When you look back behind you and there's Chester Thompson on drums, and you're like thinking, wow, this is unbelievable, But you have all these moments. But like in Red's room, it's kind of like I'm the big fish in a small pond, It's like, because of the songs that have gotten out and people recognize it. And it's fun. It's just a fun thing to strip off all the, just get down to it's you and a guitar and a microphone and an internet feed. And, so whatever's there is there. It's just, it's just got to be there in its rawest form. And that's kind of a cool thing that I've discovered that I've been doing recently.
Yeah. And that might even answer my final question that we're going to cover is, what would the Holland Davis of today tell the 20-year-old younger Holland Davis? Is there some wisdom that maybe you wish you could go back and tell that 20-year-old Holland?
What I would say is today, based on everything that I know, is invest deeply in the community where you're at. Just invest deeply, whatever community you're at. So often as artists, we're looking for the break. So we're always looking like beyond our community. Like, how do I get out? What's my big break? And I've kind of come full circle in all of that. So where like today, I'm investing deeply in my local community. And what's interesting is that the more you invest in your local community, the more your art grows. You get more people that appreciate what you're doing. They appreciate your art. And those guys are guys that will support your art way beyond. Like they'll be your evangelists. They'll go out and tell people, oh man, you got to listen to this guy. He's amazing. Or you got to listen to these songs. These songs are great. These songs are really touching our lives, and so I think sometimes we underestimate just the power of the local scene that we're in, like you're like, I keep saying, like you're blowing up with the Tourmaliners. It's like, but you're like dominating the local scene, and it's like, who else down there in San Diego right now is like the Tourmaliners? I don't know of any, that are doing like original, like radical, cool surf music. I don't know anybody doing that. And so it's like, you're like the big fish in the small pond, and of course, you don't put on the back of your, of your banner, the Tourmaliners, the sons of the Surfaris, like you don't, like you're not out there like broadcasting your past, right? It's like you're in the moment, but you have a legacy, and I think that's one of the things that's, as a developing artist, we just need to focus on creating what works here and now and be aware and be smart about opportunities. There's probably contracts I wouldn't have signed today, Like that was the other thing is like, be careful what you sign, like Larry Norman used to say. It's just like, don't sign every deal just because the guy promises to do something for you. It's like, be careful what you're signing because you don't know what you're signing. And I've coached a lot of bands, since being in Maranatha Music, and just say, hey, before you sign anything, just give me the contract. Just let me read it. Just do a once over, and I'll tell you if it's a good contract or if it's a bad contract. And every first contract you sign is bad. Let's just face it. I mean, it's a bad deal. And but I have friends that have written and sung and performed on the top albums in the world. And now they're, independent artists, and they're creating their own music. They own all their masters, and they're making more money today than they ever did on a label. And, that's the Taylor Swift story, right? Just the label took all the money and, I did all the work. And so, all of those things are things I would really caution people to, the only reason why you need a label is if they're going to put you on today, if they're going to put you on television or they're going to put you on the radio and get your stuff out there and really promote it. But if they're not going to do that for you, then as an independent artist, there's so many tools that are out there to get your music out. You really don't need that unless, if you're going to sign something away, they got to be willing to do a lot for you.
Yeah. Wow. All really good stuff there, Holland. We've come to the close of our program, but if people want to get a hold of you, worshipsong.com is probably the best way to get a hold of you.
That's our independent platform, but I have my website, hollanddavis.com. They can reach me at, and that's where I have a lot of my songs. I got my book on there. I wrote a book on worship, and that's available there. And so, but that's all the stuff that if they want to reach me or ask any questions, or I'm happy to. I coach people all the time because it's just a passion. It also keeps me in the know. It keeps me knowing what's cool and what's not cool. I also have a daughter that helps me know what's cool and what's not cool. It's like
I got two of those too. They're always telling me, Dad, you're not cool. You keep telling us how uncool we are now.
The greatest thing is lately, I'm like, man, this sounds like old people's music. My daughter goes, Dad, you're old. I'm like, I am not old. I'm older. I'm not old.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Holland, for being on Creatives Who Thrive. And I think many of our listeners and people who watch this will definitely be able to glean from your wisdom. And we'll have Holland's information in the show notes, comment section of the video or podcast. And if you learned something from this, let us know. I'd love to hear from you. You can email me, devenberryhill, devenberryhill @gmail.com if you have comments on that. Also, you can subscribe to the Creatives Who Thrive YouTube channel and hit the little button there. And anyway, thank you so much for being on the show. And we'll be putting this out probably in the next few weeks. But have a great one, Holland, and keep rocking.
Thanks, man. God bless.